A 7-year-old girl is sitting on a pavement in East London. She has not eaten since breakfast. She is waiting for her mother to come home. And then she sees the man. He is standing 15 feet in front of her. His back is to the building. He is looking at a car that has just pulled up on the opposite side of the street. There is something in the way the three of them are arranged, the man, the car, the two figures inside it, that a child should not be able to read. But she reads it. She screams. Not a child's startled scream. A deliberate, full-throated everything scream aimed at the man, at the street, at all of it. The car door opens. The car door closes again immediately. The car pulls away fast. The man is still standing on the pavement. He is breathing hard. He turns around and looks down at a 7-year-old girl who looks straight back up at him with complete, unblinking composure. There was a gun in that car window. It was visible for approximately 1 second before she screamed. It was not fired. The man's name is David O'Say. He is 45 years old. He has not been back to this part of London in 20 years. He came to look at a building survey. He took a wrong turn. He ended up standing on a pavement where a little girl he has never met just saved his life. He looks at her for a long moment. He says, "What is your name?" She says, "Lily." Then she says, "You should probably sit down. You look like you are going to fall over." He sits on the front step. He asks where her mother is. She points upward. 4 floors up, a kitchen window. A woman already moving toward the stairs. He does not know who that woman is yet. He does not know that he has been looking for her, in one way or another, for 20 years. He does not know that the letters he wrote her, 23 of them, the ones that were returned, the ones he kept in a box in every flat he ever lived in, are about to become the most important thing in this story. He just sits on the step. And he waits. Stay. Because you think this story is about a man who came back. It is not. It is about everything that happened to the woman while he was gone. And the moment that changes everything, the one that takes the air completely out of the room, does not belong to David. It does not belong to Rachel either. It belongs to Lily. And it does not happen until the very end.
Hello and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story.
Rachel was 22 when she met David O'Say at a community centre in Peckham, South London, on a Friday evening in October that smelled of jerk chicken and candle wax and the particular warmth of a room full of people who had all, at one point or another, traveled a great distance to stand in it. He was setting up chairs. She was arranging food on long folding tables. Their families had both come from Ghana within a year of each other, settled within 3 streets of each other, and somehow managed never to introduce them until this evening, which, by the reckoning of both their mothers, was a near criminal oversight. He asked her to dance before he asked her name. She told him her name first. He said it back to her, Rachel, with an exactness, a full-stop quality, like he was placing it somewhere safe. She noticed that. The way he did not rush past the small things. David O'Say was 25, tall, and not particularly handsome in the conventional sense, but he had a quality that Rachel would spend years trying to name and eventually settle on as steadiness. He was the kind of person who, when he was with you, was entirely with you. No part of him elsewhere. No performance. Just presence. She had never felt that from a man before. She did not know then how rare it was. She would learn. They dated for 8 months. Ordinary months, buses and takeaway boxes and long phone calls about nothing, the kind of nothing that turns out, in retrospect, to have been everything. He met her mother. She met his. Both mothers pretended not to be delighted and were obviously, transparently delighted. And then his uncle called from Toronto. A position at a construction firm. Entry-level but real work, honest wages, the bottom rung of something that could become a ladder. His uncle had built a life there from nothing, from less than nothing. David had watched him do it. He had grown up being told it was possible. Now someone was handing him the first step. He told Rachel on a Sunday. They were sitting on the steps outside her mother's house, wrapped in the same coat because neither of them had thought to bring two. David said, "I don't have anything to offer you here. Nothing real. Nothing permanent. But if I build something first, I could come back for you properly. I could come back and mean it." Rachel said. "You mean it now," David said. "I mean you deserve more than now." She wanted to argue. She was 22 and certain and in love in the way you are only once, the first time, when you don't yet know enough to protect yourself from it. She wanted to say, "I don't care about more. I care about you. I care about now. I care about this coat that isn't big enough for both of us." She did not say any of it, because underneath the certainty was a quieter feeling she could not quite name, the sense that she was holding something she was not yet allowed to keep, that this version of her life had a conditional to it that hadn't been written yet. He left 3 weeks later. She stood at the departure gate until she could not see him anymore. She counted the seconds until he would be out of sight. She was still counting when the doors closed. David said, "Wait for me. I'll come back. I'll build something. I'll send for you." She nodded. She believed him. She was 22 years old. Belief was the only architecture she had. The first year she wrote every week. Letters on pale blue paper, the kind her mother kept in the drawer beside the telephone. She filled them with small, careful things: the news from the community center, her mother's latest argument with the upstairs neighbor, the fact that the restaurant on the corner had changed hands and was now a nail salon. She wrote as if she were talking to him. She wrote as if he were reading. He was not reading. Not those letters. What Rachel did not know, what she would not learn for 2 decades, sitting in her own kitchen with a cup of tea gone cold, was that David had moved within his first month in Toronto. His uncle's address, the one she had been writing to, had become someone else's address. The letters sat in a pile at a post office depot and were eventually destroyed, unclaimed, the way unwanted things are quietly disposed of while no one is watching. David, for his part, had written her long letters, the first ones, the kind that take courage to send, full of the specific loneliness of a new country, the smell of a building site at 5 in the morning, the way he kept seeing colors that reminded him of her. He had called the community center. He had asked carefully whether anyone had a number for the Calloway family, a woman named Rachel. He was told she had moved. She had not moved. She was 3 streets away, writing him letters on pale blue paper, waiting for a reply that was writing her from the other side of an ocean. The second year she wrote every month. The letters were shorter. The news was smaller. She dropped the opening "Dear David," because writing his name had started to feel like a question she was afraid of the answer to. She still believed he was reading. She had simply run out of the kind of hope that produces whole pages, and had moved to the quieter, less articulate kind that produces a paragraph and an envelope and the same return address. By the 3rd year she stopped. Not dramatically. She did not burn the letters, did not close a chapter, did not have a conversation with herself in the mirror. She simply, one Tuesday morning, sat down to write and could not find the sentence that came after the first word. She sat for a long time. Then she put the pen down. She did not stop waiting. She just stopped sending evidence of it. Waiting, when you have run out of letters to write, becomes invisible. It lives in the way you answer when someone asks if you are seeing anyone. It lives in the fraction of a second before you say no, the pause you think is imperceptible, the pause that everyone around you has noticed for years. Her mother noticed. Rachel's mother said, "You are punishing yourself for something he did. And he does not even know." Rachel said nothing. She was good at saying nothing by then. She had been practicing for 3 years. What neither of them knew, not Rachel's mother, not Rachel, was that David, at almost exactly this same period, in a small flat above a chip shop in Mississauga, Ontario, had run through the same calculation and arrived at the same result. He had set down his pen in a way that was not defeat but felt uncomfortably like it. He had told himself that silence was an answer, and that a man of dignity accepts the answers he receives. He had decided to stop. Two people, in different time zones on different continents, putting down the same pen within months of each other. Not knowing. Not able to know. The tragedy of it was not dramatic, it was administrative. A wrong address. A redirected call. The small stupid machinery of bad luck doing its ordinary devastating work. Vincent Cole arrived in Rachel's life when she was 28, which is a particular age, old enough to have stopped believing in certain things, young enough to still want to. He was introduced at a wedding. A friend of the groom, compact, well-dressed, with the kind of confidence that comes not from being born to it but from having decided, at some point, that confidence was a more useful thing to perform than its absence. He was 38. He had 3 car dealerships and a house in a part of South London that Rachel had only ever driven through on the bus. He was, in every visible way, the opposite of David. Where David had been present, Vincent was strategic. Where David had been quietly certain, Vincent was loudly attentive. He sent flowers on days that were not occasions. He remembered things she mentioned in passing, a book she wanted to read, a restaurant she had walked past once, and produced them weeks later, as if he had simply been paying attention when in truth, Rachel would one day understand, he had been taking notes. She told herself it was love. She told herself she had waited long enough, and that this man, this attention, this version of being chosen, was what waiting earned you eventually. What she did not know, and would not learn until she was already inside his house and had signed her name beside his on a lease, was that Vincent Cole had a reputation among the women who had preceded her. Not a dramatic reputation. Not the kind that produces warnings or interventions. Just a pattern, a way he had of choosing women who were slightly off balance, slightly uncertain, slightly in need of something. A way of arriving at exactly the right moment. The right moment, in Rachel's case, was the exact intersection of loneliness, exhaustion, and the quiet, devastating conviction that she had already used up the best of what she had to give on someone who had not come back. Vincent had recognized that intersection from across a room. He was very good at reading rooms. He proposed after 8 months, the same timeline as David, though Rachel only noticed this later, much later, in a way that made her feel ill. She said yes at a restaurant with white tablecloths and a waiter who brought champagne she had not asked for. She said yes and felt, briefly, exactly like someone who had made a decision. The feeling lasted about 4 months into the marriage. She had told her mother about Vincent after 3 months of dating. Her mother had come for Sunday dinner, had sat across from him at the table, had watched him for 2 hours with the attention of a woman who had observed a great many men over 7 decades. Afterward, walking to the bus stop, she said very little. She asked Rachel, in the careful way of a mother who knows that overstepping will produce the opposite of the intended result, whether she felt like herself when she was with him. Rachel had said yes without pausing to actually check. Her mother had nodded and said nothing else. She had taken the bus home and prayed for something she could not name precisely, not against this man, not for a specific outcome, just a general and urgent petition to the forces of her belief system that her daughter might somehow be kept. She had not been kept, but she had found her own way out. Her mother, who died the year before Lily was born and never saw the escape or the landing, would have been, Rachel believed, unable to contain herself. The first year was beautiful. Rachel would be honest about that later when she was asked, and she was asked many times by well-meaning people who needed the whole thing to have been obviously wrong from the start. It was not. The first year was flowers and long weekends and a man who looked at her with something that resembled, convincingly, devotion. It started with language. Small corrections. A comment about the way she told a story. "You always bury the point," Rachel delivered with a smile that made it sound like fond observation. A question, repeated across several months, about why she was still in contact with certain friends, people he implied, who did not have her best interests at heart. The implication was always wrapped in concern. That was the genius of it. It was always wrapped in concern for her. By the second year, her world had quietly rearranged itself around his preferences. She called her mother less. She saw her friends in the margins of his schedule, never when it conflicted. She had opinions she no longer shared because the energy required to hold them against his counter-opinions was more than she had by evening. She told herself this was compromise. She told herself all marriages required adjustment. She had no good comparison to measure it against. The first time he hit her she was 31. They had been married 3 years. She had said something at a dinner party, a small harmless correction to a story he was telling, the kind of interjection that partners make in public without thinking, and he had smiled at her across the table with an expression she could not read. He read it to her later in their bedroom, with his hand. She sat on the bathroom floor for a long time afterward. She did not cry. She thought about her mother's voice and the way it had said years ago, "You are punishing yourself for something he did." She thought about pale blue letters. She thought for the first time in years about David, not with longing, not with grief, but with something sharper. Something like anger at herself for having replaced one waiting with something so much worse. Vincent came to the bathroom door. He was sorry. He was under pressure. It would never happen again. He loved her. Did she know how much he loved her? She knew from somewhere very quiet inside her that this was a script, that the words arriving at the bathroom door were not coming from him, but from the part of him that needed to maintain the situation, that the man who had hit her and the man now speaking softly through the door were not two different men but one man, and the second was simply the first's management strategy. She knew all of this. She opened the door anyway. She would spend years trying to explain why. She would eventually stop trying to explain it and simply describe it. She was afraid. Fear is not a character flaw. It is what happens when a person has been carefully, systematically stripped of the belief that they are capable of surviving on their own. Vincent had spent 3 years doing that stripping. He was very good at it. He had done it before. Lily was born in the 4th year of the marriage, on a morning in February when the light through the hospital window was the exact pale gold of something about to change. Rachel held her for the first time and felt something move inside her that was entirely separate from everything else, separate from Vincent waiting in the corridor, separate from the fear that had become the background noise of her daily life, separate even from the pale ghost of David O'Say that she had carried around for years like a stone in a coat pocket. This was its own thing, new and absolute. Lily had Rachel's eyes, and it turned out Rachel's disposition, a quiet watchfulness that adults found disconcerting in a small child, and that Rachel recognized immediately as the face of someone paying very close attention and choosing not to show it. She was, from the first weeks, an exceptionally observant baby. She watched faces. She tracked sounds. She would fix her gaze on her parents with an intensity that made visitors uncomfortable and made Rachel feel, for the first time in years, genuinely seen. Vincent changed slightly when Lily arrived. Not better, Rachel was too clear-eyed by then for that particular hope, but different. More contained. More careful. As if the presence of a witness too young to be managed had introduced a new variable into his calculations. The hitting became less frequent. The language became sharper. He found over the years that words did the work more efficiently than hands in a house with a child who watched everything. Lily watched everything. She watched the way her mother flinched at a raised voice. She watched the way the house changed temperature when her father came home. She watched the way her mother, in the hours between his departure in the morning and his return in the evening, became a different person, lighter, fuller. The edges of herself returned to her. She was 6 years old when she said, with the directness that children use when they have not yet learned that some things are supposed to be left unspoken. Lily said, "Mummy, why are you nicer when Daddy isn't home?" Rachel looked at her daughter for a long time. She did not answer the question. She made Lily's dinner and bathed her and read her a story and lay beside her until she was asleep. Then she sat on the kitchen floor. The bathroom floor had become associated with too many other moments, and understood, with a clarity that arrived fully formed and without fanfare, that she was going to leave. Not that night. Not without planning. Vincent was not a man who accepted being left quietly. But she was going to leave. Because Lily was watching. And Lily was learning. And Rachel would rather die than let her daughter learn that this was what love looked like. She sat on the kitchen floor for a long time that night. She thought, as she often did in moments of extremity, about David. Not with longing that chapter had, she believed, been closed for years. But with something that felt more like consultation. She thought about who she had been at 22, standing at a departure gate, and what that woman would say if she could see this kitchen floor. What she would say about the choices that had led from that gate to this linoleum. She thought the 22-year-old would not say anything. She would simply recognize it. She would know that the person on the floor was still her, still the woman who had believed, still the woman who had waited, and that the waiting had simply happened inside the wrong thing. She thought, I am going to get up, and then I am going to get out, and I am going to do it in a way that my daughter can be proud of, not because it was dramatic but because it was careful and patient and intelligent. She got up. She went to bed. She began the next morning to plan. She planned it for 4 months. This is the part that people find difficult to understand, not the leaving but the planning. The length of it. The patience. From the outside, 4 months looks like hesitation. From the inside, it was engineering. She opened a bank account he did not know about, at a branch she had never visited with him. She deposited cash, £10 here, £20 there, the kind of amounts that disappear in the rounding of the weekly shop. She identified a shelter, not the nearest one which Vincent would know about, but one across the river, further than logic would suggest she would go, which was exactly why she chose it. She copied her documents, hers and Lily's, and stored them with a neighbor, an elderly Jamaican woman named Gloria who had lived 2 doors down for 15 years and who, when Rachel told her a carefully edited version of what was happening, looked at her with eyes that said she had known for much longer than Rachel had been ready to tell. Gloria said, I've been waiting for you to knock on this door for 2 years, child. The room is ready. She left on a Tuesday in November. Vincent was at work. Lily was at school. Rachel packed 1 bag for herself, clothes, documents, the photograph of her mother she kept on the nightstand, and a single pale blue envelope she had never sent, and collected Lily from the school gate at 3:15 in the afternoon. She told Lily they were going on a small adventure. Lily, who was 7 by then and had been watching everything, looked at the single bag and said nothing. She took her mother's hand. She walked to the bus stop. Rachel did not look back. She had looked back enough times in her life. She was done with it. The shelter was a Victorian terrace with thin walls, and a shared kitchen that smelled of other people's suppers. Rachel and Lily shared a room with a bunk bed and a window that looked onto a brick wall. Lily chose the top bunk. She said the view was better. There was no view. Rachel loved her so much it was almost impossible to contain. She found work quickly, cleaning offices, night shifts, the kind of job that is always available to anyone willing to be invisible at midnight. She was very good at being invisible. She had been practicing for years. The flat they moved into 18 months after the shelter, when Rachel had saved enough and established enough, was on the 4th floor of a council block in Bethnal Green. 2 bedrooms. A kitchen window that caught the afternoon light. A front door with 2 locks, both of which Rachel used. Lily's bedroom wall was covered in drawings. She drew everything: the view from the kitchen window, the neighbor's cat, imaginary landscapes with improbable architecture. Rachel bought her paper in bulk from the market on Roman Road, and taped new sheets to the wall when the old ones were full. The wall was never empty. Rachel worked nights. 3 nights a week, sometimes 4. On those nights she would cook Lily's dinner before she left, leave it covered in the fridge with a note, and be home by 6 in the morning in time for the school run. Lily, who was 7, had developed a morning routine of impressive self-sufficiency. She made her own breakfast. She chose her own clothes. She was, Rachel understood, compensating, filling the gaps in a quiet, practical way that made Rachel want to weep and burst with pride in the same breath. The day it happened was a Wednesday in March. Rachel had worked the night before, and had slept until mid-afternoon. When she woke, Lily was not in the flat. She was not alarmed immediately. Lily sometimes sat on the front steps when the weather was good, watching the street with the forensic attention she brought to everything. Rachel made tea. She looked out the kitchen window. She saw from 4 floors up the top of Lily's head. Then she saw the man. He was standing on the pavement perhaps 15 feet from Lily, his back to the building. He was not looking at Lily. He was looking at a car that had pulled up on the opposite side of the street. The car had 2 men in it. There was something in the arrangement of the 3 of them, the angle, the stillness, the quality of attention that Rachel, even from 4 floors up, even through a kitchen window, registered as wrong before she could name why. What happened next took less than 4 seconds. Lily screamed. Not a child's startled scream. A deliberate, full-throated scream, directed at the man in front of her, at the street, at everything, the kind of sound that stops traffic and empties lungs and makes every head within 100 meters turn. The man spun around. The car door opened and closed again immediately. The car pulled away fast. The man stood on the pavement, breathing hard, and looked down at a 7-year-old girl who looked back up at him with complete composure. A gun had been visible in the car window for approximately 1 second before Lily screamed. It was not visible afterward. It had not been fired. The man's name was David Osei. He was 45 years old. He was a structural engineer who had built a successful firm over 20 years of early mornings and careful work. He had come to Bethnal Green to look at a site survey. He had taken a wrong turn. He had found himself, briefly, in the geography of someone else's war. He looked down at the girl who had saved his life. David said, "What's your name?" Lily said, "Lily, you should probably sit down. You look like you're going to fall over." He sat on the front step. He asked where her mother was. She pointed upward at a kitchen window 4 floors up, where a woman was already moving toward the stairs. Rachel came through the front door of the building at speed, still holding her tea, wearing the coat she had grabbed off the hook without thinking. She found a man she had never seen sitting on her front step beside her daughter, both of them apparently waiting for her. Her hand went to her coat pocket before she could stop it. The knife she had carried since the shelter was not there. She had stopped carrying it 6 months ago. She was aware for a second of that absence. Rachel said, "Who are you?" The man stood. He was tall. Gray had come into his hair. His face was lined in the way that faces are lined by outdoor work and sustained worry. He looked at her with an expression she could not immediately place, the kind of expression you see on a person who has been searching for something for a long time and is standing now in front of it and cannot quite believe the search is over. David said, "Rachel." She heard the word before she processed who had said it. Then she looked at him properly. 20 years had changed everything about his surface. But underneath the gray and the lines was an expression she recognized, the specific quality of attention, the way he was entirely here, no part of him elsewhere, that she had once spent 8 months being the recipient of and had never found again in anyone since. Rachel said, "David." Not a question. A recognition. The kind that bypasses the rational mind entirely and arrives whole somewhere further down. David said, "Your daughter just saved my life. I was trying to find a way to say thank you, and I realized the only honest version of it was to say it to you. I know I have no right. I know what I owe you. But she told me to wait. And I am apparently still doing what the Callaway women tell me." Lily from beside him said nothing. She was watching Rachel with the focused attention of someone observing a significant experiment. Rachel looked at her daughter. She looked at David. She looked at her tea, which was cold. Rachel said, "You'd better come up." They talked for 3 hours. Lily was eventually dispatched to her bedroom with a bowl of cereal and the understanding, communicated entirely through the careful neutrality of her mother's expression, that this was an adult conversation. She went without protest. She took the cereal. She left her bedroom door open by approximately 4 inches, enough to hear, not enough to be told to close it. David told her about Toronto, the lost address, the letters he had written and the calls he had made, and the year he had spent, the whole first year, trying to find where she had gone, and eventually, at 26, deciding that silence meant something he did not know how to argue against. He told her about the years after, the firm he built, the marriage he had entered at 32 and left at 37 without children, without a clean explanation, with the low-grade permanent feeling of a man occupying a life he had built in the wrong shape. Rachel told him about Vincent. She told it plainly, without the editorial addition she sometimes added when she could see that a listener needed to be guided toward the correct reaction. David listened the way he had always listened, without inserting himself into it, without the particular male discomfort that made some men visibly want to locate someone to be angry at rather than simply be with the person in front of them. He listened to all of it. David said, "I am sorry. I am sorry I didn't try harder to reach you. I'm sorry that the silence became a permission for something that should never have happened. I know I was not the cause of it, but I know I was the gap it walked into." Rachel looked at him. Rachel said, "I spent a long time being angry at you. Then I spent a long time being angry at myself for waiting. Then I had Lily and I didn't have time to be angry at anyone. I think that might have been the best thing that ever happened to me." She said it lightly, but they both heard the weight in it. Lily appeared in the kitchen doorway at this point, bowl returned, face composed, to announce that she was going to have a bath. Lily said, "You can stay if you want. There's more cereal." She was speaking to David. She delivered it with the tone of someone conferring a significant honor. David, for the first time in the 3 hours, smiled a full, unguarded smile that Rachel recognized immediately, across 20 years, as the same smile she had last seen at a departure gate in a different century. She looked away before he could see what was on her face. He did not rush anything. This was the thing Rachel noticed first and held on to longest, that David, at 45, moved through her life the same way he had moved through a room at 25. Slowly, with attention, as if each moment were a chair that needed setting up properly before anyone could sit in it. He came back the following week, and the week after. He brought Lily a set of drawing pencils, the proper kind, the ones with names for the precise shades, because he had noticed the wall of drawings and asked Rachel about them and listened carefully to what she said. Lily received them with the gravity of a small person who has identified a significant gift and does not want to underplay it. He did not try to be her father. He did not try to be anything, in fact. He simply kept appearing consistently at the door, with the low-key reliability of someone who has decided to be present and is not making a production of it. Lily decided, after approximately 3 weeks, that she trusted him. She announced this to Rachel in the matter-of-fact tone she used for meteorological observations. Lily said, "He's the kind of person who does what he says he's going to do." Rachel looked up from the dishes. Rachel said, "How can you tell?" Lily said, "He said he'd come back last Tuesday and he did. He said he'd look up the pencil set and he did. Small things, but they all happened." She went back to her drawing. Rachel stood at the sink for a long time. Small things. They all happened. She thought about Vincent, not with the old fear, which had dulled over 2 years to something closer to wariness, but with the clear analytical eye she had developed in her own absence from him. Vincent had been very good at large things. Grand gestures. Significant occasions. He had been expert at the big sweeping movements that could be witnessed. He had been incapable of small things. The small consistent things, the Tuesday promises, the looking things up, the simply arriving when you said you would, were beyond him. Because small things when you failed them were noticed. And Vincent had believed until the end that he was not someone who could be found out. Rachel dried her hands. She thought about a promise made at a departure gate that had been kept, imperfectly and late, but in the only way available to a man who had not, as it turned out, forgotten. She thought, this is what it was supposed to feel like. The following week, David stayed later than usual. Lily was in bed. They were sitting at the kitchen table with the remains of dinner between them and neither of them apparently in a hurry to be anywhere else. David said, "Can I ask you something?" Rachel said, "Yes." David said, "Do you ever regret it? Waiting, I mean. Even the parts that turned out to be misdirected." Rachel considered this carefully. She had thought about it. Not obsessively, not with the anguish of her 30s, but with the measured quality she had developed for examining difficult things now, the way a doctor presses gently on something to find out where the pain lives. Rachel said, "I regret Vincent. I don't regret the waiting. The waiting was just time. It was what I did with the time that went wrong." David said, "You didn't do anything wrong." Rachel said, "I didn't ask the right questions. About him. About what I was agreeing to." David was quiet for a moment. David said, "I think you asked the only question you had at the time, which was, is someone choosing me? And the answer was yes. That's not stupidity. That's just being human and tired." Rachel looked at him. Rachel said, "You're very good at saying the right thing." David said, "I have been practicing in my head since approximately 2003. She laughed. A real laugh, unguarded, the kind that takes over the face. He watched it with an expression that was, she realized, simply happiness. Uncomplicated, unperforming. Just a person glad to be in a room where someone was laughing. She thought, yes, this is what it was supposed to feel like. He found them in the spring. Rachel did not know how. She had been careful. The shelter had been careful. The flat's lease was in a name that required local authority documentation to link to her. But Vincent had money and time and the particular obsessive energy of a man who believes that someone he considers his is somewhere without his permission. He did not come to the flat. He sent a solicitor's letter, first formal, measured, invoking his parental rights with respect to Lily, whom he referred to throughout as the minor, as if she were a footnote in a transaction rather than a person. Rachel read the letter 3 times, hand steady. Then she called the housing worker she had been assigned at the shelter and had stayed in contact with. Then she called her solicitor, a woman named Priya who had represented women in exactly this situation for 22 years and who, when Rachel read the letter to her over the phone, made a sound that was not quite a sigh and not quite a word but communicated precisely that she had heard this letter before. David was at the flat that evening. She showed him the letter without comment. He read it. He set it down. David said, "What do you need?" Not, "I'll handle this." Not, "Let me find out who this man is." Not any of the responses Rachel had steeled herself against, the ones that would have required her to spend energy managing him rather than the situation. Just, "What do you need?" Rachel said, "I need Lily not to be frightened. And I need this to be over." David said, "Tell me what helps with the first one. Priya handles the second." Vincent appeared in person 6 days later at the school gate, which was a violation of the court order that had been issued with remarkable speed, owing partly to Priya's experience and partly to the fact that a social worker's report compiled during the shelter period, thorough and damning, had been waiting for 2 years for exactly this kind of proceeding. The appearance at the school gate was, in retrospect, the mistake that ended it. Not because it frightened Lily, though it did, but because it was witnessed by 2 teachers, a teaching assistant, and a parent who had her phone out for an unrelated reason and caught the entire thing on video without realizing, until afterward, what she had captured. The court case took 7 months. Rachel attended every date with Priya beside her. She told the truth plainly and without embellishment because the truth, plainly told, required nothing added. Vincent went to prison. Not just for the school gate incident. The investigation it triggered uncovered what Rachel had suspected but never confirmed, that she was not the first. 3 other women. 2 other orders. A pattern so consistent it had its own file. The day the verdict came, Rachel sat in Priya's car outside the court for 15 minutes and did not speak. Then she said, "I want to go home and make Lily's dinner." Priya drove her home. That evening Rachel made pasta. The ordinary kind, the kind Lily had loved since she was 4, and could articulate preferences about dinner. She set the table properly, something she only did on specific occasions, using the good plates, because the good plates had been bought in the shelter's charity shop for 30 pence each, which made them feel, always, like a small defiant luxury. David came after dinner, as he had on most evenings that year. He brought nothing. He sat at the table and drank tea while Lily showed him a new drawing, a portrait, she said, though she would not say of who, and Rachel washed up and listened to the two of them talking in the way that people who are comfortable with each other talk. Without agenda, without performance, simply occupying the same space and finding it enough. Later, after Lily was in bed, David said, "It's done then." Rachel said, "It's done." He did not say anything else. He did not produce a response. He simply sat with her in the kitchen until she said she was tired, and then he said good night and he left. She stood at the window and watched his car pull away. She thought, this is what safety feels like. Not the absence of danger. Not protection. Just the specific, uncomplicated presence of someone who will leave when you ask and come back when you need and not require you to manage the distance between those two things. He did not propose during any of this. This was something Rachel noticed that David, through the 7 months of the court case, the witness statements, the days when Rachel came home looking like someone who had been standing against a strong wind all day, did not once make any of it about them. He did not use the difficulty as an occasion for declarations. He did not offer himself as a solution to a problem. He brought dinner on the hard days and left when she needed quiet and answered the phone when she called at 11 at night and needed to talk about nothing. He was simply and consistently there. Lily, who had been watching all of this with the attention she brought to everything, made her own assessment and delivered it one Saturday morning at the kitchen table, without preamble, while eating toast. Lily said, "Mom, I think you should marry David." Rachel put her mug down. Rachel said, Where did that come from?" Lily said, "He makes you the person you are when he's not here. That's the test." Rachel stared at her. Rachel said, "What does that mean?" Lily said, "You know how you're different when some people are around? Like you sort of shrink? He doesn't do that. When he leaves, you're the same size. I think that means he's not taking anything." Rachel sat with this for a long moment. Lily finished her toast with the composure of someone who has said what needed saying and considers the matter settled. She was 9 years old. Rachel thought about this for weeks, turning it over, examining it, the way she examined things now, carefully, before accepting them. She thought about the night she had sat on the kitchen floor and understood she was going to leave Vincent. And the thing she had understood was not "I am unhappy" but "Lily is watching and learning." It had been about Lily then. And now from Lily it came back. "You're the same size when he leaves." She was. David proposed on a Sunday, quietly, at the kitchen table, in the middle of a crossword puzzle. He put the newspaper down. He said her name in that same way, Rachel, with the full stop quality, the placing it somewhere safe. He said he was not going to make a speech because everything he wanted to say, he had been trying to show for the past year, and if she had not seen it by now it meant he needed to try differently, not more dramatically. David said, "I would like to stop going home." I would like this to be home. I would like, if Lily agrees, to be here. For as long as you'll have me. And I recognize that given my previous record with leaving, you have every reason not to trust that. So I'll just say that I'm asking. And I'll keep asking as many times and for as many years as it takes. Rachel looked at him for a long time. Rachel said, "You came back." David said, "I came back." Rachel said, "You took your time." David said, "I know. I'm sorry for that. Truly." She was quiet for a moment, not hesitating. "Arriving," Rachel said. "Ask Lily." He found Lily in her bedroom adding to the wall. He knocked on the open door. She turned around. David said, "I'd like to ask your mum to marry me. I wanted to ask you first." Lily looked at him. She put her pencil down. She gave the question the serious consideration it deserved, which took approximately 12 seconds. Lily said, "You screamed for her once already, just in a different way. I think that counts." David did not immediately understand what she meant. He would think about it later, much later, and understand that she was talking about the letters, the calls, the years of trying to reach through silence, the specific kind of screaming that has no sound. He said, "Okay, thank you." She handed him a drawing pencil. Lily said, "You can add something to the wall if you want. You live here now." The wedding was small. A register office in Hackney on a Thursday morning in June, with Gloria from 2 doors down at the old flat, Rachel's mother who cried from the moment she arrived until the moment she left, Priya the solicitor who was visibly delighted to attend a happy occasion for once, and David's uncle from Toronto, who flew over and shook David's hand on the register office steps and said, in a voice thick with something he did not name, "Took you long enough, son." Lily was the witness. She signed the register with the focused precision she brought to everything, then looked at what she had written and appeared satisfied. That evening after dinner, when David had fallen asleep on the sofa and Lily was in her room adding something to the wall, Rachel sat at the kitchen table and opened the drawer where she kept the envelope. The pale blue envelope. The one she had packed when she left Vincent. The one she had been carrying in one bag or another for 6 years. She had never sent it. She had written it in the 3rd year of her marriage, at the kitchen table of a house she was afraid in, on a night when Vincent was out and the house had briefly, mercifully, exhaled. She had written it to David, knowing she had no address for him, knowing it would never be sent, writing it anyway because there were things she needed to say to him, and saying them into the silence felt less entirely futile than not saying them at all. She did not read it tonight. She did not need to. She knew what it said. She had written it and reread it enough times in the years since that it was simply part of her, like the pale scar along her jaw that she no longer noticed in the mirror. She put the envelope on the kitchen table. She thought about writing a new one, a very short one, but the thing she wanted to say resisted language. It was simpler than a sentence and more complicated than a feeling. It was something closer to the sensation of a door, which had been held open for 20 years against all reasonable expectation, finally closing gently from the inside. Not closing against something, just arriving at rest. She put the envelope in the recycling. She went to bed. Lily is 15 now. She takes up more space than she used to, not just physically, but in the way that teenagers do, with opinions and music and a certainty about the world that Rachel recognizes, with some amusement, as her own at that age, before the world began its long work of complicating it. She is still watching everything. She has simply, over the years, started saying more of what she sees. Rachel is 44. She works as an office manager for a legal firm, not Priya's, though Priya was the one who mentioned the vacancy, in the offhand way of someone doing something deliberate and wanting it to appear casual. She is very good at the job. She has a talent for seeing the systems inside things, for knowing where the gaps are before they become problems. She came to this talent the hard way. She uses it lightly now. David's firm is doing well. He still gets up early. He still reads the crossword. He still says Rachel's name the same way, with the full stop with the placement. She has asked him once whether he does it deliberately. He said he did not know. She believed him. Last month, Lily stood up in front of her school year group and gave a talk. The topic was, "A person who changed your life." The teacher had expected most students to choose a parent or a coach or a book. Lily chose a 7-year-old version of herself. She told the story without self-consciousness and without drama. She talked about the Wednesday afternoon in March, and the man on the pavement, and the scream she had let out, not because she had calculated the consequences but because something in her body had recognized that this was a moment requiring everything she had, and had acted before her brain finished the question. She said, "I saved his life. But I had been saving my mother's life for years before that. Every time I said, without knowing the words for it, 'This is not right.' Every time I asked the question she wasn't ready to answer. Every time I showed her, just by existing and watching, that someone could see her clearly and still love her without condition." She said, "I think that's what children do for their parents sometimes. We hold up the mirror they can't hold up for themselves. We show them who they are when no one is managing them. And sometimes, if we're lucky, they look." Rachel was in the audience. 3rd row. She was not crying, or she was slightly, in the way she sometimes did now when something landed fully and she let it. David was beside her. He found her hand in the dark and held it. She let him. If this story found you tonight, leave a comment. Tell me which moment you could not move past. Was it the pale blue letters written into silence? Was it Lily on the pavement, 7 years old, screaming with the full force of everything she had? Was it the kitchen floor, and the understanding that arrived without fanfare, and the 4 months of engineering that followed? Was it the letter in the wardrobe and what it said, and who finally delivered it? Tell me where in the world you are watching from tonight. And if you have been waiting for something, if there is a letter you have written and not sent, a door you are standing at, a voice telling you that staying is loyalty when it is really just fear, share this. Not as proof of anything, just as company, just as the reminder that some stories do arrive at their right ending, only later than they were supposed to, only by routes no one planned. Subscribe. Stay close. There is more where this came from.